into a brand new hour of CBS Sports HQ presented by Enterprise. We got the whole crew here on set. Haley Sutton, I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, Brady Quinn, and Pete Prisco. And it's already been crazy in terms of free agency. Yeah. The legal tampering window, that is open. But officially the signing period, not until 4 p.m. But we've seen a lot of big names on the move.
It's laughable. It really is.
Yeah, we've seen running backs.
They've been tampering for a month already. I mean, and back in Rick Spielman's day, they used to tamper at the Pro Bowl in January.
Yeah, Rick Spielman's actually off to the side, so of course Pete had to get a dig at Rick before he comes on set. But yeah, it has been crazy, Haley.
It has. Of course, we are presented by Enterprise. Today, as Jacqueline mentioned, NFL free agency in full swing. A lot of guys have already found new homes. So let's continue the conversation and talk through. As Jacqueline mentioned, free agency. It's been a whirlwind the last few days with players moving left, right. Shout out to Dion Dawkins, though, by the way, who pranked the entire league yesterday, teasing that he wasn't making a return to Buffalo, but he stuck around. Just one of the many notable moves made already. Here, though, top 10 free agents this offseason, according to our Pete Prisco, who, of course, is on set with us today. A lot of guys on this list have found new homes, some sticking around. But we're going to key in on some of these guys, namely Calvin Ridley, Kendall Fuller, just to name a few, to discuss best options for them moving forward. So, gentlemen, let's start with that number 8 spot, Pete. Calvin Ridley, waiting potentially for a new offer in Jacksonville. He had a sneaky good year last year. Taking a look back at the numbers, he was over 1,000 yards this season. So in terms of Calvin Ridley, what are your expectations for him going forward? Does he stick in Jacksonville, or is there another fit for him?
401, he will sign a contract, I think, in Jacksonville today. If they had signed him before that, he would obviously they'd have to give up a second-round pick. Now they can give up a third-round pick to Atlanta in exchange for him. So it makes sense to wait. He has an offer from New England as well. But I think when you're looking at it, he always wanted to go back to Jacksonville. He didn't like the idea of going to learn a new offense. He struggled to learn the offense last year. And I think being comfortable in the offense next year, he'll be even better. So now, what do? They'll probably release Zay Jones, maybe a couple other moves to get, cap reliant, and then it's going to be Gabe Davis, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk. And Evan Ingram.
It's a heck of a trio of wide receivers, and those two that I think, if they start finally stretching the field vertically,
that'd be nice.
Should challenge a lot of defenses down the field. But it makes complete logical sense to say he's going to sign back in Jacksonville for some of the reasons you discussed. The fact that he's more familiar with the offense. I think probably more so than anything else, he's playing with Trevor Lawrence. He's playing with question mark right now in New England because we don't know who they're going to draft number 3 overall, and probably as far as from a production standpoint, he's best suited to stay in Jacksonville. But he would have already done a deal with another team at this point, given that we've almost through 48 hours of legal tampering. You would figure he would have signed if he already got a better offer. Clearly, it seems like he wants to go back to Jacksonville, and there's probably some sort of wink, wink, nod, nod agreement where let's wait till after 4 p.m. so we don't have to give up a second-round pick.
Yeah, 401, as Pete said.
Yeah.
And no state income tax in Florida either. Playing a big factor.
Like, that's the other thing is, like, not all offers are the same, right? If Jacksonville offers him the same amount as New England, if you really want to break it down and get into the financials, you're paying a pretty hefty state income tax playing the AFC East as opposed to playing in the AFC South, given no state income tax in Florida, but also Tennessee, Texas, Indiana's low, relatively speaking. These are all things as a player, your agent, your financial guy, they all talk to you about during this time.
Plus, he is a Florida kid. He's from right down the road here in Deerfield Beach, so he wants to stay in Florida, and I think they're going to work it out, and he'll end up back in Jacksonville.
So Calvin Ridley, as of right now, the top wideout that is still out there on the market. Let's talk about the top corner, Kendall Fuller. We saw him on your list, Pete. I believe he's the second or third free agent that is still, in general, that is on the market. As far as the market for him, Brady, what are some teams that have a need for corner that you could see as a fit? I know we talked about the Seahawks potentially. The Steelers are out there, but what comes to mind for you?
And the Seahawks, the Eagles, the Titans, there's a bunch of teams. I mean, the Colts you can make the case for. You can make a case for a lot of teams that need, really nowadays, 3 cornerbacks. You got to have 3 corner cover players because you're dealing with now more 3 wide receiver sets. So you have to be able to match that personnel. The interesting thing is when you see guys who hang on a little bit longer, it's usually due to medical. There's something going on where teams want to bring them in for visits. They want to check them out. There's some nagging injury that we're not privy to that the teams are aware of that they want to make sure before they make a significant investment. That's typically the case here. Sometimes it's age. Sometimes it's the player.
Price, too.
Price could be that, but sometimes it's the player, too, wanting to go around and take visits. There are some guys who, if they've never been to that city, they haven't seen the facility, want to talk to the coaching staff face-to-face, in certain circumstances, it's usually all about money. But sometimes there's some other factors that play a role, too, and sometimes that's part of it.
This one surprised me because he played really well last year. And, you know, the corner...
Yeah, we should sign back just back in Washington.
That's probably what he'll end up doing.
It would make a lot of sense.
It would make a lot of sense. And, you know, the Lions had a need for corner, but they filled it. They went out and made the trade for Carlton Davis. They signed Robertson for the Raiders, so now they filled it. So, but there still are options for a good corner. There's only so many of those guys. He'll get signed somewhere, but you're right. He might end up going back to Washington.
Yeah, interesting how Washington is sort of panning out. I've been joking calling them the Cowboys Junior since Dan Quinn is just plucking Dallas Cowboys left and right. It wouldn't be a show that Haley's on if we didn't get to talk about my Cowboys. And it's so funny because Jerry Jones had this big statement about going all in. As someone who has supported this team for so long, we knew that was a joke, right? But for a lot of the fans, they're kind of confused as to what that all-in approach is. When you talk about a guy like Tyron Smith, who's been a part of this organization for so long, he's been such a staple. The optimist in me is holding out hope that he will return. He'll bolster an offensive line that he's really solidified on. But, Pete, when you think about Tyron Smith, he's getting up there in age now and going into year 14, I believe. What does the market look like for a guy with so much experience but has dealt with injuries throughout the late part of his career?
I'm astounded the Kansas City Chiefs haven't really, and they just restructured some money in Patrick Mahomes' contract, so maybe that sets the tune for them to go out and make a move to get a guy like him, because if they can get him to play left tackle, their left tackle was bad last year, they can bring a guy like that in for a year or two, make him your left tackle, give him an opportunity to go win a Super Bowl, it would make a ton of sense. And if not, we talked about it in agreement, I think maybe go back to Dallas. I think those are two possibilities for Tyron Smith.
Yeah, we've already seen how they've kind of shuffled the pieces that they have there in Dallas, you know, as far as you can move Smith out at the left tackle spot, and they should be fine.
If he doesn't come back, yeah.
If he doesn't come back. But, again, it's age and maybe price and then injury concern. I mean, that's the thing is, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, as much as it sounds enticing when Tyron Smith is healthy to put him out there left tackle, the last thing you want is to sign him to a 2-year deal, and he's not playing for you for the next 2 years. And now you've got another issue you're still dealing with at the tackle spot. So that's first and foremost. The interesting thing about Dallas at this point, though, because there are a lot of people complaining about the lack of activities, they don't have much cap space. There's not a ton of room. And so there's not really much they can do at this point unless they restructure Dak Prescott's contract. And he's got all the leverage. He's got a no trade clause, no franchise tag clause. His cap hit is huge. But unlike Kansas City, who you just mentioned, who restructured Patrick Mahomes' deal, I don't know how Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys feel about Dak Prescott, because you would have thought by now they would have restructured to create cap space so they could be more of an active player with a couple of the holes. Because to their credit, they've done a really good job building this roster. When they're healthy, there's not too many holes as far as their starting 22 on offense and defense that you're looking at, but clearly they've got a few spots.
Linebacker. Linebackers are terrible.
Interior offensive line and linebacker.
Interior defensive line. You know, they drafted Mozzie.
They've drafted Mozzie. They've drafted Osa Odigizua. Like, they have guys there that just, some of that could be scheme-wise. We don't know how that's going to change over with Quinn not being there.
True, but they got to get better at linebacker, and now they need to find a running back, but that's not a problem. You can draft them in the 6th round and he'll end up starting.
Well, apparently the NFL doesn't think that, Pete, because as soon as legal tampering started, every running back that was potentially available got signed.
And you know what? If you go back and look at the history of running backs who changed teams in free agency, I think the last one who really was any good was Michael Turner. I think that was 2008.
So you're saying all these running backs are just going to be
dumb. It's dumb. You draft them, you run them into the ground, you draft another one. That's the philosophy.
You have so much heart and compassion for these running backs.
No, I don't. I mean, it's a football. It's a realist of football. That's what I am.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a show without Haley mentioning the Cowboys and Pete taking a jab at running backs in some capacity. But, Pete, you're going to grade every single team in free agency. That's coming up at 4 p.m.
Are they paying you more for this?
No. That was just something they wanted to do yesterday, and I decided to do it.
How did they keep working you so hard this time of year?
And by the way, grading free agency the day of is like a little tough to do, because A, I'm not a big fan of paying a lot of money for free agents, so I still have to grade
cold takes, get ready.
No kidding.
Yeah, Deep Tea is coming up at 4 p.m. right here on HQ. But in the meantime, Brady, we want to know, who do you think, what team has had the best free agency, at least up until this point?
I'm going to be lazy, and I'm going to go with the Atlanta Falcons, because when you put yourself in a position with a first-year head coach, Raheem Morris, to address the biggest glaring issue, and you pry a guy away who was playing, honestly, at an MVP level before he got hurt last year in Kirk Cousins from the team he was at. I really do believe that there's probably a lot of reasons why he would have rather stayed in Minnesota. But that being said, you now find yourself an offense that has Darnell Mooney as a part of it, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, obviously Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, but also a coordinator, Zach Robinson, that's going to run the same system. I think he's going to have a lot of autonomy with Zach Robinson being a first-year play caller in that OC spot with controlling what they do, which is probably pretty attractive too. So I think you have to give Atlanta a lot of credit because as soon as they signed Cousins, now they're all of a sudden the tops of at least the NFC South as far as division battle goes. Odds-on favorite to win it.
Are they? I mean, they're the favorite.
Tampa's right there, but they're the favorite.
Yeah. By the way, here's a little tease in the business. They got a really good grade, by the way.
I bet they did.
Yeah, they did.
Which is shocking because you can't compliment Kirk Cousins without some sort of insult.
He was my #1 free agent. Of course I compliment him. He's the #1 free agent.
Yeah, but then you made a comment.
Well, then I made a comment that the good news is
one playoff win in 12
No,
years.
the good news is he doesn't have to play any big games in Atlanta, so that's good for him.
Well, they're going to this year.
They're going to get a lot of primetime games, probably. Not.
And they're going to get some primetime games.
Yeah, maybe one or two.
Spicy as always, you two. We love it. A reminder, Pete's going to grade out the rest of the free agency coming up at 4 o'clock on HQ. Gentlemen, we always appreciate the time and the spirited conversations. Hey, to keep up with all the latest in free agency as well as March Madness around the corner, y'all got soccer games kicking off. Be sure you have the CBS Sports app. You can scan that QR code on your screen to download, keep you up to date with the latest news, highlights, analysis, and then some on the CBS Sports app.